Mayor and Council, we can't hear you on Zoom.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I'll try speaking loudly into the microphone. Is Grace Clapper here?
Yes.
Grace, here's what we do. We ask you to come up to the microphone, and you have expressed an interest in the Planning Commission and the Traffic Advisory Commission. And tell us why and what you would bring to the table.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for your invitation here today. I am a resident of Webster Groves, of course, which doesn't necessarily mean that I'm interested, I guess, but both things interest me. I'll start with the Plan Commission. That's my primary interest. And I have always been interested in communities. I'm a human development and family studies undergraduate major, and something that's always fascinated me is how individuals come together to form families, families come together to form communities, and communities need a structure to operate in. Over the years, I've lived in a lot of different places. I was a naval officer, and everywhere from East Coast to West Coast to Washington, D.C., also working for the federal government in management consulting. And I have grown to appreciate how those structures and policies are so important to how a community functions in the fabric that becomes ingrained through generations. I have a 5-month-old daughter, which has only further entrenched my interest in this community and making sure that the decisions being made and for now and into the future are in the best interest of all people who have a desire to live here and are hopefully attractive to generations to come.
Can you tell me a little bit about your current position and what you do?
Sure. I work for a consulting company. The name of the company is Booz Allen Hamilton. It's a federal consulting firm, and I work for a DoD client, and I'm embedded with the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency here as a liaison between that party and other interested stakeholders regarding GPS. So I'm quite familiar with bringing together stakeholders. Sorry, I can't go into a whole lot of detail on this subject.
Right.
For a common interest, and doing that within the bounds of contracting and legal documents. So I think that's really the area that I would be bringing skills to the table, is my experience working within policy documents, just for the federal government instead of local government.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have a question for Grace?
I just wanted to comment as a fellow Illini. It's interesting to hear
Yeah.
someone with a career from HDFE. So I haven't heard that term in a long time. So glad that you interviewed.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Grace.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your interest and telling us a little bit about yourself.
A little about myself.
Yes, thank you for telling us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do it all again.
No more. I understand that Mr. Hunkins is here, and if you would like to tell us why you are reapplying for the Planning Commission, we would appreciate that, Steve.
I'm Steve Hunkins. I've lived in Webster for 42 years. I'm now retired, and I really enjoy the planning and zoning. I want to do nothing but help the city do better, and that's how I view everything, is trying to make us a better community for people to work and people to live, people to play.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Are there any other boards or commissions that you are interested in with your experience and longevity here?
I haven't really thought about it, but if I'm back out to pasture, then maybe I will.
Thank you.
So
Any questions?
along those lines, Steve, I know you are a valued member of the Plan Commission. However, what would be your, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you want to stay on the Plan Commission?
Well, I would love to say.
Okay,
I thoroughly enjoy it.
okay,
I enjoy all the people that are on it, and I enjoy all the different things that come in front of us. So I thoroughly enjoy it. So.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Can I say regarding Mr. Hunkins that having served on the commission with him, he always shows up prepared. Always, he inspires conversation and he's an absolutely essential part of that commission. So.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. We will come back to talking more about
We have
appointments.
Cal Wilson as well.
Is Kyle here?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Mr. Wilson, would you come up and do the same thing then? I missed him. Sorry.
If you don't mind, I'll remove my mask while I talk here. I won't go into too much depth. It's been a few months since I saw you last interviewing on the TIF commission. But for the record, I'm an architect and a general contractor based here in St. Louis, and I work on projects across the United States in various categories, verticals as we call them. I'm interested in volunteering on the Plan Commission. I've been a member of the Architecture Review Board for the past 4 years. I've been an alternate recently. I don't get called very often anymore. I'm interested in potentially leaving that role, having been there for 4 years, and there might be someone to replace me soon, I hear. Interested to continue to volunteer for the city, and I think the Plan Commission is a good fit for my skill set and experience in real estate and land use. So. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any
Thanks, Cal.
questions
Any
for
questions?
Mr. Wilson?
Thank
I
you.
assume that this was asked when you got appointed to ARB, but just to be sure, given your professional background, is there anything that you think might be a conflict of interest at any point?
If there's a project that I'm involved in, I will disclose that. So if I have a project that's coming up before the board, I'll have to just abstain myself. That's how it works on the ARB. So
Yeah.
for
It sounds like
as
you know,
rarely.
you do a lot of not here stuff.
Yeah, the scope of my work is getting a little bigger, a little more industrial. And there is, we do build condos. I mean, we're building condos in Kirkwood. One of our projects is a finalist for a real estate award. So multifamily is one of my verticals. So if one of those type of projects comes up similar to Douglas Hill and I'm involved, I would have to recuse myself. But otherwise, I would just weigh in with my opinions, knowledge, and insight.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Kyle.
Thank you. All right, Katie, anybody else that I missed?
No.
Okay,
That was
thank
it.
you. Sorry, Kyle. I just didn't see you out there. All right, I think we've been through our board and commission interviews. Is there anything on the regular agenda that the council needs to deal with? If not, we will go on to the meeting issues and updates, and I'll start with Sarah.
No, just none this week.
All right, I miss Katie. Katie, do you have anything you
No,
want to add?
thank you.
Okay, Sarah, sorry. Emerson?
None, Mayor.
None for me either.
I'm going to break the streak here. The Business Development Commission met on the 24th. The business survey is active on the city website. So anyone who is a business owner, knows a business owner, does work with the city, please go online and fill out that survey. It's very important for us to learn more broadly about our business community and how we can better serve that community. That's probably the biggest thing from that meeting, although we are continuing to work on the Explore Webster Groves website as part of the overall website rebuild. The Sustainability Commission also met. Please be reminded, mark your calendars, May 1st is Webster on Wheels, which the Sustainability Commission is a co-sponsor of this year. And this commission is finalizing their draft of the sustainability plan, which is called Forever Webster Groves. I expect we as a council will see that within a week or so. I also was at the St. Louis Municipal League meeting, find the right page of notes here. There were two things of interest. Eric was there, Assistant City Manager was there as well. One is, and I'm looking at Mara because I'm sure Mara knows this already. There's something going on with the fence ordinance and something that was passed last year. I believe that they're going to try and get some model legislation for us to make sure that we're all in compliance following the state action. The second thing is there was a really good presentation on the infrastructure bill. We're going to have to wait for a while to get the final ruling, but there are going to be lots of opportunities for us to apply for grants. And so that just needs to always be on our radar. And that's it for me.
And that fencing thing is really interesting. It was a sentence that was slipped into a bill that was passed last year that really influences all of our fencing regulations, and we really need to deal with
Yeah, and I
with
think
that
it's,
very soon.
and I think it's Creve Coeur that has most recently done one that is likely to serve as somewhat of a model.
Yes, the yellow fence that someone put up in their front yard. Okay, Mr. Franklin.
I have nothing, Mayor. I have nothing, Mayor.
Thank you. I just have one thing. And council, I'd encourage you if you have some other things to add, but I want to talk about Prop U real quickly, the use tax that is coming up on April 5th ballot. I believe most readers that have seen the WKT ads from Preserve Webster, and there's a lot of inaccuracies in there about the use tax Prop P. So I want to just talk about those because it's important for our voters to understand what Prop P is so they can make an informed decision. The city will also have some Prop P information coming out as well.
Prop U.
It's you.
Pro-
Oh, I'm
Prop U.
sorry.
Prop U.
Thank you. I don't know where I was going. That was a previous prop. But thank you for that. So the use tax, and what I really wanted to share, it's being purported as a tax hike, and it's not. And it's really important to understand that it's not a tax hike or a double tax. What it does is that the use tax is only applied to products that would otherwise be subject to a sales tax if that item were purchased locally. And it's really important because as online shopping has increased, specifically around, the pandemic, we've all shopped online more. Our local retailers are missing out on those purchases, and those revenues across cities are also decreasing. So it's one way that it's helping even the playing field, if you will. The other item that I would share is that this is vastly different than the previous proposition last April that indeed did fail. That part of the ad is correct. It failed by 12 or 13 votes, but it is not the same proposition. It's very different in that the previous one was cumbersome for individuals because they had to track the sales taxes and do the receipts for that. The state of Missouri has removed those provisions. And so now it is no different than if you would just purchase something at a store. That tax is now added. So wanted to share that. And if anybody has any questions, please look at our website. We'll have that additional information out as well. And we're excited and happy to answer any questions about that so voters can decide how they want to vote on that issue.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Karen, do you have anything you would like to add?
No, I don't, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. And I've just been with 2 meetings. The Arts Commission met this morning and spent some time talking about their budget for the coming year and some time. Hopefully, we're going to have that Baroque concert again. The Police Community Engagement Board met, but we will have that later on the agenda to take a look at. All right, so we have a couple of topics here tonight, and the first topic has to do with housing Afghan refugee families at Eden Seminary. And I'm presuming that the city attorney can tell us what we need to do to allow that to happen if the council so chooses.
So there are a variety of ways, but I'm going to say that I'm going to defer to Mara, who she and I have talked about this, and she has prepared a proposal for you in that regard. But I have reviewed this and it is consistent with our ordinances.
Great.
I'm going to pass this out. There currently is in the code an opportunity to be able to make this happen without having to do anything to waive anything. So once this comes around, the front page identifies the code section, which explains what can happen on Eden Seminary's campus or any other campus that's zoned to EC1. And on the back are a couple bullet points of how it could operate. I'm not completely sure what organization is organizing this, but I know that the International Institute many times is one of the organizations that houses refugees when they come to the St. Louis area. So whoever that entity is that is bringing people to the community, the seminary can actually lease to them. So if they lease to them, it provides so not-for-profits and LLCs currently are allowed to lease property from a Webster, or both Webster University, but also from Eden Seminary. They do a business license so that we can inspect the space and we know how much space they're using. And then Eden Seminary does have to provide us a full accounting of how much square footage they are leasing, because there is a maximum. And there's a maximum that gets taken out of the number of units that are currently being leased as student housing to any students that are not part of their campus. But overall, it's something I know Webster Arts has recently moved out of their lease space. There are a couple other small leases that they have going on, but if they give us an accounting, provide us with a business license, we do an inspection, and they could go in that area.
Oh, good.
So my understanding is that to start, it would be one apartment, possibly in the future, 2 apartments. In terms of the physical space you're talking about, I assume that's under the parameters, and given that they have a fair number of vacancies, I don't think it would impact that ratio you're talking about either.
I don't think so, but we haven't gotten a recent accounting. During the pandemic, they did start leasing out some additional spaces. We've talked with them about that and asked them to come back to us so we could really understand how much they were leasing. They're supposed to get inspections for all the lease spaces, and we haven't had some recent inspections. So we would want to just do that for life safety purposes, make sure all the inspections are done correctly and get a full accounting of their numbers, but I don't think they're going to come anywhere close to their maximum.
So we could do this with some speed in the next week and move forward with this.
Yeah, if the seminary could get us that accounting information, and someone, again, I'm not sure who the entity is. Again, I know in the past, International Institute have been one of the organizations that would find
Yeah,
housing.
so it's a local nonprofit that
Nonprofit,
would be the
How?
front row here.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
And so the question then becomes, I don't think it's been solidified with Eden yet, which apartment and when. So I think that provides us some time to get everything sorted out together. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I want you all to know as a council, Mara is remarkably creative when it comes to these sorts of things, to come up with a way that meets not only the letter, but the spirit of the ordinances. And so she's worked very hard to make sure that this works. I mean, the idea was goal-oriented, but it squeezes nicely within the ordinances as they exist, and it can be done. And again, this is something I see her do all the time, but it's worth noting.
Great. Thank you.
My question is, we're having 2 Afghan refugee families. What happens if we get a 3rd or 4th?
So again, we would look at it. There's a provision that confirms that they cannot use more than a certain amount of square footage overall. So we would get that accounting pulled together, and should they start to exceed, they would have to stop. We couldn't lease any additional spaces. There is another provision in here where they can ask for conditional use permits. That's a longer process, and that's a process that I think we would want to really take a hard look at, because technically, according to the letter, it's student housing only. So providing a CUP for what really isn't student housing would be going a little bit beyond the ordinances. But again, I believe the way that the codes are written in here, you can lease to these various entities. You can't, like if someone wanted to use 50% of that 35%, which is, it's never going to get to that number. But if they were to do that, that's when we would hit a maximum. So we just need to have an accounting of all their various spaces to be able to verify that they can meet it. But yes, it could potentially do a certain limited number. It just couldn't go up to like an entire building. We probably are going to start bumping up against some of the provisions here for the limitations.
I just want to make sure we didn't tie our hands just by saying 2 tonight, that we can't do 3 later on.
As long as this would continue to be, and so each space, if they expanded, each of the units would be inspected, just like they're inspected for anyone leasing space on any property.
And council action is not needed to increase it.
No, council action, and unless you were going to go and completely change the EC ordinances to change either the 50% or the 35% or those numbers, which that's a bigger endeavor. But right now, I believe that there is a way to make this work within these parameters and be able to make it happen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mara. And we have speaker cards from the folks in the front row who have been really the movers and shakers in all of this. And so when we come to the time of remarks of visitors at the meeting, we want to hear from you about what you've done and where you're going with your plans, because those of you sitting here have really done a hero's job over the last month or so. So we'll be glad to get an update from you.
I have a few questions. I'm sorry, Mara. This is obviously former councils and a lot of community members, including the mayor, worked really hard on this this ordinance here. So for clarification purposes, I just want to ask a few questions for the public to understand. You used a lot of pronouns they, and I'm not sure who they is. I would imagine that's Eden Seminary. They need to provide an accounting.
And I said they because there are multiple EC1 districts. So if, for example, Epworth, they did have dormitories. If Epworth was the entity that someone wanted to lease from, Epworth would provide an accounting. So I wasn't saying Eden specifically, because I was trying to keep it open that anything in an E1, if Great Circle wanted to do this, if Epworth wanted to do this, if Eden wanted to do this, any of the three have the opportunity in the EC1 to provide an accounting of who they are leasing to.
All right. Is there a definition within the code for student housing?
Yes, there is a
Alright.
definition.
And is it your opinion that these refugees would not meet the definition of student housing?
Correct.
All right. And then the accounting that is provided by any of the EC entities, how is that verified? Is it verified?
So if we feel that there is, as staff, and we're reviewing it, if we feel that there's something that seems off, we can go in. We do have a laser tool that helps figure out square footage of space. We ideally wouldn't have to do that. We have, when Eden and Webster University were going through their entire process, there's been a whole series. There were, I think, 14 CUPs for Eden and 42 for Webster University.
53.
All of those documents I have in a drawer with files, including floor plans. So it's pretty easy to cross-check some of the existing buildings. They haven't changed for many, many years.
Yeah.
So that wouldn't be that difficult.
Based off of the numbers that you do have, what's the current accounting?
I did not go through that. I hadn't had time. I know this came up before I went out of town, and then I tried to, yeah.
You're fine. I just want to know. Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Mark.
Any other questions?
Just for clarity, the logical next step then is for the facilities person at Eden to call you to make sure he understands what it is he needs to get you.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
All right. So we will move forward next to the diversity, equity, and inclusion follow-up. And I think that goes to our city manager.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. So this is just meant to be a follow-up from the February 2nd presentation from Carter Hicks on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Doesn't have to be a final decision this evening, but so staff can start planning. We just really was hoping for some guidance and direction on next steps. The report shared several recommendations, both for internal and external. So some of the conversation points, anything that we do will most likely have a budget line associated. If I get a feel for where council is wanting to go with this, then we can start exploring that. We could start exploring either with Carter Hicks. We could look at other RFP options. There's a myriad of options we could look at. We'd just really like to hear from council. And if there's additional information that you need me to bring back, if you'd like a recap of the presentation, just really looking for that direction this evening.
Well, I can start and say to you that I think the easiest, most logical step going forward is to form that DEI council. I mean, that was one of the recommendations. And certainly we have a lot of experience in this town with boards and commissions. And so I think we could do that. That would be my recommendation.
So thank you, Mayor, because one of the things is, the recommendation was that we draft a vision and mission statement with a strategy and a plan. And the council would be in a position, I think, to help us do that and broaden the perspective beyond the council, because then we'd have staff input, we'd have community input. I wish I'd asked Ms. Carter Hicks if, doing that first seems logical. Are there any pitfalls to doing it that way? Because I think it would give us a better plan from the very beginning.
So should we, I guess, make the plan before starting the council to make sure we have the steps needed as we go along?
My preference would be to do the council first because we can leverage some of the expertise we have in our community to do that.
So you're
And local
leaning to not
and
get an
internal.
outside facilitator?
I still think we need an outside facilitator, but
You let the council be the unit to make that decision or either
Make
make a
what decision?
recommendation for another outside
oh,
third party.
Can we call it something other than the council? That's going to get confusing really fast.
I mean, the commission.
Yes.
Commission.
Yeah.
A
We're all
commission.
calling it the council, I think.
I think a commission is the better way to go, Sarah. Yes. DEI commission.
But I'm okay with creating a commission, but I do think one of the first steps is of that commission is to see what outside parties were available to guide us
Right.
through that entire process.
So most likely there would also need to be an ordinance drafted to create such a commission.
Yes.
And so some considerable time also, what is that commission tasked with doing? What should the membership of that commission look like? Will there be term limits to said commission, that sort of thing? In terms of either a staff liaison or consultants, however that works, who that person would be to do that. In many ways, there's benefits to not having the person. We don't have that capacity internally. So as the council, this council, not the commission, considers that, what do you envision in terms of someone helping to drive that work? And I can bring more information back on that and perhaps have a conversation with Ms. Hicks on that as well. But just some other factors to think about.
You think Carter Hicks will give you a recommendation on how that commission should look?
I think she would be happy to do that if that's our starting point.
I was going to suggest, one of the recommendations was to hold regular listening discussion sessions. Maybe we hold a listening discussion session about forming the commission and what the community envisions the commission to look like and what their responsibilities and goals would be as a commission.
And I think reading that, if Carter Hicks can provide us with some information for the community to say, this is what this council and commission normally perform, the duties they normally perform. So all of us is moving in the same direction.
Yeah. I know that, one of the first recommendations says to strategy and plan to leverage strengths and address barriers. Seems to me, I know we've discussed it before at this council, but whether we should require members of council as a group to do DEI training and also leadership within City Hall in order to begin the process.
When you say council, you mean us or?
This council.
Didn't we
I
just-
agree. We should be right in the mix of all the training and all the discussions. It has to start at the top so that we'll know what's going on. We
Is-
should be the leaders of that process.
I'm not finding the document at my fingertips, but
Okay.
I would just suggest maybe we look at maybe the top 3 suggestions from Ms. Carter Hicks and look at
Certainly.
them kind of in a holistic manner so that we can decide about this. But I do agree about training and I do agree about the commission, but I think it's hard for us to facilitate organizing a commission if we're not all at some baseline of training.
But as a legal matter, we can't require training, can we? We can, as a council, decide we're going to engage in it, but we can't legally mandate that some council member come.
Yeah, it's followed. A council member?
Yeah.
Well, no, that's right. You can't mandate a council.
Are
member.
we, I don't think we're talking about that, are we?
You used the
Legally-
word required. I just was
Oh.
following
Yeah,
that.
Sorry.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. I was just saying,
Councilmember
instead of
Franklin
maybe,
did.
required, but just we do it as a
Yeah,
group. And
strongly
I agree with that.
suggested,
Yeah,
yes.
absolutely.
Yes.
if an individual council member doesn't want to attend, obviously we can't force them to attend,
Right.
except for maybe sheer will.
So that's very helpful. Thank you. And we can revisit those top recommendations, because it was also parsed out in terms of internal recommendations and external recommendations in the community.
Mhm.
And one of the things that she shared is that she, as a recommendation, that we start in-house, that we get our own house cleaned up before we go external to the community. So something else to think about. And certainly there's no magic in terms of anything that we do is going to be towards the good and moving forward. But just as an organized fashion, and I will follow up with each of you individually as well. And certainly this isn't the last conversation. But as you're thinking about this, what might that internal mechanism look like? How might staff approach it? And of course, following those recommendations. But again, there has to be a concerted effort and there needs to be someone to lead that work. So how is council envisioning that? And I can also check in with other municipalities. Other municipalities, we're certainly not alone. Every organization, pretty much regardless of what type of organization, is doing some sort of DEI work. So if it would be helpful, I can bring back perhaps what other municipalities, nonprofits are doing and how they're arranging that work.
I think that's a good idea, but there are some cities that already have DEI commissions. And so I think seeing how they work, how they were formed is probably a good idea.
And whatever information Carter Hicks give us, I say take it.
Talk to her again next Thursday if you come to the Lions. Generation Dignity, right?
Oh, that's right.
Okay. Is that enough to get us started?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right, let's go on to the compensation and classification follow-up.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. So along those same lines, on January 18th, you received the compensation and classification survey results from the consultant. It was a lot of information to absorb. I followed up, I believe on February 1st, recapped some of the information and provided recommendations. So wanted to have some discussion with council based on my recommendations. And again, no decisions are needed tonight, but this will be costing information. So if there's other numbers that you would like to see, and just as a recap, and for those of you people here as well, 34% of our positions were at or above market, and 41% of our positions were found to be under market average. So some of those recommendations included bringing those 41% up to their new minimums and doing so by May 21st. That cost was around $141,000. Second recommendation, then, because our at market folks are at risk of being under market, was then to have all employees provided a 3% COLA. Typically, that adjustment is done around July 1st if there is some type of merit increase. Recommending it to coincide May 21st. That cost would be around $178,000. Again, we can bring you those numbers, but as you're looking at what other municipalities are doing, as what you're seeing, does the 3% COLA feel good to you? Do you want to see other numbers brought back? Are you comfortable bringing staff to minimum? As a reminder, we did put $30,000 in the budget so that we could implement some of the comp and class recommendations this year. But considering budget, perhaps this isn't something you want to have the discussion now. All things are on the table, just trying to find some guidance so that I can bring council back some information.
Frankly, I think it's imperative that we move on the comp and class study. I mean, I think it's clear that we have a significant portion of our workforce that are underpaid based off of the market value. And that's unfair to them. And it's also unfair to the residents, I think, that their civil servants are not being paid a wage that is commensurable with their counterparts. We have funds to do so. And I see no reason why we should not proceed with this.
You're talking about bringing those below the minimum up to the
Correct.
minimum.
In regards to the 3%, I think I would want to think about that a little bit more based off of where our current budget for this fiscal year is. If we are currently under budget, then I would see no reason why not to. But if we are seeing budget red, then I think it would be a little bit more difficult.
Thank you.
And I agree with David, compensation and classification with diversity, equity, inclusion go hand in hand. You know, that's outward display to the staff. That's what we're looking at. So I'm in agreement to bringing those individuals up to the classification that they belong in, as far as salary is concerned.
Thank you for sharing that, Councilman Smith. So there were some DEI implications with comp and class that there were recommendations for further study on. Don't know that we need to do that at this point in time, but we do need to be mindful of that as we move forward. The other piece I would also share is that, and I didn't bring these numbers, but know that we have a significant number of our employees that are over the age of 50. And so we know that we're going to continue to see retirements. We've seen quite a few. We also know that in our skilled trades, we're going to continue to see turnover as the market is just continuing to increase in the salary for those skilled trades, which is fantastic to see because they've been underpaid for years across markets. But we're seeing that now and we're having difficulty keeping up. Just as an aside, I don't know if you all saw an article on Target in CNN. It was yesterday, but the Target's going to start paying starting workers up to $24 an hour. Wow. I know the comp and class during difficult budget times is a hard discussion to have, but we have to pay people. And so if Target can do it, we're going to be in trouble. So
And
anyway.
it's more expensive to turn an individual over and hire somebody. That's been proven.
And can you just refresh my memory? This will or won't apply also to part-time positions? It's come up sometimes in our Parks and Rec meetings, and I was trying to remember.
Part-time positions already had some increases built into budget because minimum wage was increasing. So that's not to say that they won't need some adjustments to be at market as well, but they're not included in these prices.
Okay.
The costs that I just shared, but that's certainly a factor there. You brought up another thought with part-time positions. Sorry.
So, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I agree with bringing up the 41% that's under market because an awful lot of those are lower level wage folks that we really do need to bring up to market. I would want to think about that 3% and know what the status is of our current budget before I would go there with that. And I don't see the urgency of doing that in May. That may be something that you could hold off to the next budget year and have a better idea of where we are. I think David's right about that.
Dr. Peoples wanted the, you said it was 170,000 impact.
The 3% would be about 177,000 and change.
Okay, what about bringing those 41, bringing them up, the 41% up to?
141,000. So we're talking a total of.
Dr. Peoples.
300 Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
Oh, so the total is 318. I just wanted to clarify the 41% are under market. The 141,000 number, however, is only about 30 employees who are below what would be the new minimums that would be created in the compensation system that the study recommended. So that, to give you a sense, that's not 41% of our workforce. That's about 30 people that need to be brought up to what would be the new minimums. And then the 3% equity that was applied across, COLA equity applied across all in the recommendation from the class for the study, was intended to then move people into the market. So the distinction is really pulling people up into the new minimums of the system and then where in the market range we fall and when we implement that.
Now, will there be an impact to this year's budget totally, or it just be a portion of the dollar amount?
So if you remember the recommendation on May 21st, if we use that May 21st date, which the reason it is, it's the start of a new pay period. So it makes it easy to implement. That cost would be about $16,600 for the remainder of this budget year. And then that would be built in, that 141,000 would be built into the base across all the salary lines in the next budget.
Okay, yeah.
So Eric,
Sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead, Sarah. I'm sorry.
But that figure does not include the 3%, or it does.
That's correct. That just simply moves everyone into, we would be establishing the new ranges and then be required to pay them at least the minimum of the range they are placed in. So
I would encourage us to think hard about the 3%. It may not seem like much, but it feels like we're bringing people up to the very minimum we're now setting as a minimum. We're not necessarily putting them where they belong in the range. There's a difference there that I feel like even if it's just a cost of living adjustment, it would mean something.
Mhm.
And my heart absolutely agrees with you, but outside the context of the overall budget, it's really hard to figure out how we do that. If we're going to do it, we have to maintain it over time.
Right.
And the figuring out how to maintain it over time is I think the crucial part of this.
So
it's
as I
okay to look
shared
at
in
that as
the
a
budget
strategic-
presentation, oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I just say it's okay to do this as a strategic timeline. We'll do so much this period and do so much the other period.
We can look at this and model it a variety of ways. There's not just one size fits all. I think as a recommendation, definitely getting those people that are under market to that minimum has to be done, but we can model this, bring it back many different ways. The cost of living index, last I looked, and as the consultant shared for this year, I mean, it's through the roof. It's 7 or 8%. It's going to continue going up. So believe me, I understand the difficult decisions around the 3%, but as we are bringing people into market, as Councilwoman Richardson said, we're quickly being outpaced, and there is a high cost to turnover, and we are seeing that turnover, particularly within our skilled trades. I mean, we're losing people for, $3,000 and $4,000, which may not sound like a lot, but it's important to those individuals, and I get it. And so anyway, I also will make the commitments, as I did during the presentation, that we're going to have to hold departmental lines to that amount. We're not asking to increase the overall budget, whatever council decides by that amount. We're going to have to figure out ways to absorb it. So that's definitely, and we can have some better ideas and trade-offs and share what those are when I have an idea of what council is thinking. So this conversation is helpful.
To that point, I mean, in terms of thinking about trade-offs, I mean, that's part of the decision-making process. And so I agree that we're going to have to do this, and as you put it, hold the line, but it's hard to do it without knowing what some of the trade-offs might be.
Or where we are now.
Yeah.
We really need to know where we are now in terms of our budget.
So we do know where we are in terms of the budget. Council received the 6-month financial update in January. It's not helpful necessarily to give a week by week update because things haven't changed. We don't have our revenues in. Our next big revenue that we're expecting to be loaded in would be the second meeting in April. Eric, is that correct, or the first meeting?
We would expect sales tax revenue on April 10th. So
Thank you. So we do know precisely where we are, and I can also share with you the departments are doing an excellent job being mindful of their spending and that we are keeping under. In terms of the trade-offs, that is definitely a fair question to ask. And what I can share with you, because we're a service agency, and so our largest expense is personnel. And so where we're seeing those trade-offs is through personnel, and we're seeing it through attrition. We're analyzing every single position. Once somebody exits, do we need to fill that position? Can it be reused in a different way, or can it be job shared? Is that position still needed? So, and those are hard discussions to have because every position, of course, is important, but what else can we do? And I think it's also important to recognize that as we automate things, that does change not only the skill level needed, but it changes the output and what that position looks like. So we really are rethinking all kinds of positions, but that's really going to be the largest trade-off, is it's going to be through attrition and our positions.
Okay, well, it looks like this is not the end of this discussion, but the
Didn't anticipate
beginning.
it would be.
So we will see where we need to be at the next meeting, but I'm going to move on because the American Rescue Plan survey results, I think, is a major piece here that Mr. Peterson is going to provide for everyone.
yes, Mayor, and thank you very much. I'll pull my screen up. Give me 2 seconds here and we'll share this so everyone on Zoom can join in. But you should have at your desk materials that we provided and we did email. And these materials for the public that we're discussing tonight are also going to be available on the web, and they in fact are right now. So let me walk through balancing act of the American Rescue Plan and the results of our time out with the public talking about how to spend this $4.6 million. Again, just briefly, the American Rescue Plan is the federal stimulus plan passed in early 2021. The city of Webster Groves will receive just over $4.6 million in 2 different tranches, which we need to allocate for spending by the end of 2024. So our balancing act simulation was open for 45 days from January 11th to February 24th. I just want to commend our community. These are really awesome numbers, and I've had some conversations with balancing acts folks. We got 20 minutes average on the site from folks, which is a incredible attention span that our community paid to the items that were there and the decisions that were going to be made. I just cannot tell you how pleased I am, but also just how thankful I am for the kind of attention and education that our citizens went through, and those who were on the site to learn. Over 700 page views total, 132 submissions of the data, which we will go through, but that's just outstanding numbers for our first time out with this tool. So I want to commend everyone, including the council, our teams, and also the citizens and residents of Webster Groves and those who engaged. Submissions, so these are the 132 submissions. 103 were made by residents who were not employees, 8 made by residents who were also employees, 3 made by non-residents who were not employees, and 18 by employees who are not residents of the city of Webster Groves. Those were 2 questions we asked. I'm sorry, I want to make sure I didn't miss a question. Okay. You will notice these numbers, if you look in your the individual form, council members, we asked the question twice at the beginning, at the end. Are you a resident? Are you an employee? A couple folks did change their answers from the beginning to the end. So I don't, I can't explain that, but so I'm just pulling the numbers as we have them. And but that's why we gave you individual submissions, so you can go through and count and see what you wish to see there. These are sessions by city. So these are where Google Analytics thought this was being accessed from. You can see the largest section in Webster Groves, St. Louis area, our neighbors in Kirkwood. Then we see other cities, minor amounts, but all accumulated at 177. But you see that we also had some visitors from across the country because we had some other municipalities looking at how we did things. Denver, we received a lot, Chicago and Erie. So these are people who didn't submit. This is the page views and where they were viewing the page from. We also asked folks who did want to go through the balancing act to drop a pin where they live. They could move the pin wherever they wish. Gives us a heat map. This is our regional look, so you can see folks as far north up there by Florissant down to Arnold area, in the city of St. Louis and out to well past Chesterfield and such, dropping pins in the regional look. And in fact, there's some even farther out that I would have had to zoom so far out on the map that I don't think it would have had quite the impact. But this is our representation across Webster Groves. And so you can see, not unsurprising, where our engagement is. Some folks drop their pin in a park, which is just fine. But I did notice, let's just assume for the second that the pins were all dropped in an accurate location. From my vantage point, looking at the data for just a couple days, we saw representation across Webster Groves, but a smaller usage in South Webster than, obviously more heavy pin in placement to the north of the interstate. But then also I noticed, you can see, if you can follow my mouse, there's the hole that is Webster University, but I was surprised that Webster Park didn't have more pins dropped in it in such a way. So I just, nothing to be drawn from that. I'm not drawing any conclusions, just pointing out things that you notice in the visual. From the 132 submissions, 112 were submitted by residents who live in 63119, 20 by other locations. This is our gender. We had 73 male, those who reported themselves as a male gender, 44 female, 14 are no report of gender, and then 1 who reported another gender or non-binary, excuse me. So we did have a more male representation, which in local government engagement, as we talked with Ms. Starkey and others, and in my experience, is exactly opposite of what we usually have. We usually see more female engagement in local government issues. So this is a bit of a trend breaker here for us. And looking at our age range, another trend breaker, our highest category was 30 to 49-year-olds, 63. The light blue, usually in local government, you see more in the 50 to 69 category, 43 reported. So that is to us a great trend. We had 12 who did not report an age, 10 who reported being 70 plus, and only 4 from 18 to 29. So again, very limited engagement, not unsurprising for local government, but something for us to strive for with improving our connection with millennials and zennials under the age of 30 in Webster. These are our opens by expense category, and for the public and for the council, I want to explain that these are the little I button behind each item where we had information. So what this indicates is really time spent reviewing, and you can see that 856 times, one of those I buttons in the City of Webster Groves category was clicked, 820 under the public infrastructure category. So really an opportunity to see, the where people were reading, instead of just reading the one line in the question, where they were really trying to see what's in that, what are we looking at? And that's just back to engagement. A lot of our business items were very self-explanatory, so you can understand some of the falling number there. So now I will move into results of options and what was submitted. We had 6 categories, which included your ideas. We had put out the balancing act with $9.1 million of spending tagged to those amounts. That's in the original proposed amount category. This is by category. So there are some items. If you look at the business line, there was, I think, 10 items in that category. But overall, across the 132 submissions, these numbers represent what people submitted average across the categories. So if we were to look, and obviously totals to just under 4.6 million, every one of the categories was reduced as I fully expected. But this gives us a sense on the average of where people put 4.6 million as the whole 132 cohort. About 142,000 in the residence category, 280,000 in housing, 430 plus in business and nonprofits, 1.68 million in infrastructure, 1.9 in the city, and about 97,000 in average in your ideas. So again, just averages across those categories. The next item is the leading item per category relative to the proposed amount. So what this means is that these were the items reduced the least by what we had originally put in for funding. So the first category in residents, to give an explanatory note, the utility tax rebate for low-income seniors, the net submitted amount by everyone who submitted was $67,273. So that was the least reduction, that 67.27 of $100,000 that we started with. Again, that doesn't mean that we should fund it at that amount. This is just showing you which item in each of the categories, in the folks, as we went through an exercise of reducing funding, they reduced the least portion thereof. In the housing category, the home repair program scored at 71, almost 72%. In the business category, the small business micro grant program came in at just over 71%. For public infrastructure, moving everything out of the water, really bicycle traffic at 86% was the big winner in terms of the least amount of reduction. So in fact, I'll show you on the next slide what that means overall. And then fiscal sustainability for the city, the restaurant using it for revenue loss, that's almost 80%. So that spoke well in terms of potential ideas for the council. Overall, top 5 items. So these are the same items we just saw, just ranked in order of by percentage, how much compared to the proposed amount these items were funded at by the folks who submitted. Bicycle traffic was our winner. At 86% of the 100,000 was left in for funding. Again, doesn't mean we fund that amount. Could be more, could be less, could be none. Just giving you a sense of what folks liked the most in terms of, by way of saying what they reduced the least. Restoration of revenue was number 2. The home repair program and micro grant program for business, a close 3 and 4. And then the utility tax rebate for low-income seniors. Using the same formula, we can look then at the bottom 5 items, the things that received the least amount of funding. In the business category, the business district's kiosk conversation, 12% funded that at just about $12,000. The on-demand microtransit system, 28%. Incentivizing residents to shop local, 30%. Basic business education and mentorship, 31%. The home buyer down payment assistance program, 32%. Overall, what I saw is most of our categories fell somewhere between 35 and probably 62%. So And we'll talk about some top lines that I saw, and then obviously engage in conversation and discussion. I also wanted to point out that we took in 111 total comments on individual items from across the submissions. These are just a random 6 that I pulled out of the list. So this is qualitative data to help go with each item. And you have a report that I'll explain in a second that shows these as well. The bottom 3 were simple 1-word or 2-word little statements, on some of these things. One person commented on one item, just no, plain no, the meh, sort of indifference, and then obviously a brilliant. So again, a random sample just to give the community a sense as we go through this presentation of what kind of qualitative data the city has accumulated as well. So very preliminary takeaways from myself. We obviously looked at the data for about a day. Dr. Peoples and I, before preparing this presentation, we did see strong support for the use of revenue replacement if the council so decides for ARP funds, which is obviously a very allowable item. And then also there are programs that we think, we put a little muscle behind them and start to talk about their benefits if you choose to and want to approach them, could really generate a community consensus for funding. Obviously, bicycle traffic scored high. So if we really want to talk about bicycle funding, I think we could. If we tried to put that same effort behind business district information kiosks, we may fall short on getting the community to rally with the council, right? So I think we have some opportunities there. But one of the things we didn't see because of, and I really didn't expect it, but we had a lot of items on that because our community has a lot of great ideas, right? And so we did not receive, in my opinion, a very clear mandate that we should absolutely look at this item over that item, or a great cohort of items in either way. Even things like looking at lots of conversations in the comments about the infrastructure bill and some of those items related to Shady Creek. I noticed, some submissions that I really thought would have been one way that turned out to be a different way. And so for you, the council, as we wrap up, and then we're happy to go through conversations. And for the public, we have 4 items that are all available and online right now. People can go to the webpage and find them. This presentation, there is the categorical responses and data, which is about 60 pages, printed 2-sided. It's a PDF that is right from Balancing Act. So this is nothing that we created. It's pulled right out of Balancing Act. We also have a document that is the submitted comments document. It's about 5 pages. And that is every comment tagged to which item it's referencing to, and then that person's change to the amount of funding. So like the first comment on that is in relation to the new housing on city-owned or acquired property. The commenter said, why should the city develop houses unless you're talking about selling underutilized city-owned land, and reduce the funding down to 0. So you can see the comment and how it aligns to the quantitative data. And then also for the public, every individual submission is available online. And I want to be very clear, we took out all personally identifying information. So there's no IP addresses, no geographic location addresses or names or any of that data. But you can go through and see every submission all the way across. It takes 4 big pages to go all the way across the document and see all the submissions, but all 132, the comments, how they lined up, and every category. This is all available to the public and to the council, and really tonight meant to jumpstart a conversation as you all think and ruminate on this data over the next couple weeks and months of where we would like to see ARP funding flow to. So Madam Mayor and members, I will stop sharing and encourage everyone to ask any questions I have. I'm happy to opine and give you my thoughts on anything, and then also take an opportunity to spend a couple of weeks looking at the data. We obviously aren't asking for decisions tonight, but really dive into where you think you'd like to go.
Thank you very much. There is a tremendous amount of data here, and I think it is extremely interesting. It's great to look at the comments. It's good to see what people think about various proposals. And I'm going to suggest that those of you who care about our city take some time and look through these. And I think the council also, and we need to put this perhaps on the next work session about next steps. All right.
Eric, have we
Okay.
received all the funding?
No, Mr. Smith, excuse me, we've received the first tranche. We would expect the second tranche, which is half, 2.3 million this coming fall.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. For those of you who are here, we are going into, I think we probably will need to speak with Mr. Smith at the next meeting, and we keep putting this off, but we will determine at the very next meeting the Planning Commission membership. We need to do that. For right now, I'm going to suggest that we take a quick 5-minute break because we do have the Police Officer of the Year, and I think that there are a number of people out in the hallway who want to come in and celebrate. So let's just take a quick 5-minute break, and we'll come back in and move forward. Okay? Go ahead and call the regular session of our City Council meeting to order this evening. And again, if you're here, you can submit a speaker card and speak at the remarks of visitors. And if you're on Zoom, we ask you to go ahead and raise your hand and we will call on you at remarks of visitors. So welcome. We stick to our 3-minute rule and we'll go on with the roll call. Katie.
Mayor Welsh,
Here.
Councilmember Arnold,
Yes, here.
Councilmember Bliss,
Here.
Councilmember Franklin,
Here.
Councilmember Smith,
Here.
Councilmember Alexander,
Here.
Councilmember Richardson.
Here.
All right, our first agenda item is always such a wonderful time of the year to recognize our public safety staff. And tonight we're going to recognize the Police Officer of the Year, who is Philip Jordan. And so, anybody from council wants to come down? Fine. Otherwise, I'm going to
Take my mask off.
Whereas Police Officer Philip Jordan began his employment with Webster Groves in 2019 and has been chosen as Officer of the Year. Whereas Philip led the department in traffic citations and arrests, 6 of which were for felonies, and 1 a drug dealer selling products to high school students. Whereas Philip was recognized by the Shrewsbury Police Department and nominated for recognition by this department for his excellent work in catching and detaining subject to vandalize multiple vehicles in Shrewsbury, who was suspected of theft in Webster Groves. The suspect was later charged with 1 count of felony, property damage, and 9 counts of property damage. And whereas Philip consistently exhibits the positive traits and attitude that exemplifies those expected of Webster Groves police officers, and through his actions has helped make Webster Groves a safer community. And whereas Police Officer Philip Jordan is to be commended for his commitment to public safety, work ethic, and exemplary service to our community. So on behalf of the city, we wish to thank and honor Police Officer Jordan for his service to our community, making Webster Groves a safer place. And we will proclaim this Friday, March 4th, as Philip Jordan Day in the city of Webster Groves.
Appreciate the good job he does with bringing deputies here with us. Very accepting department of the city. Good to you. Also.
They'd rather listen to you than us.
I just want to say thank you, Chief. Thank you, all my supervisors, my friends, my family. You guys do a lot. Done without anything. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome to stay for all of the meeting if you would like. You can go or not, you can go out and take some pictures and, celebrate in whatever way one chooses.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, we're going on to remarks of visitors, and we have a number of speaker cards this evening that deal with the Webster Groves Afghanistan project that has been in the works. And so I'm going to ask Liz James to come up first and tell us about this project because it is truly wonderful.
Okay, hi. We have set 5 members in our group and maybe 10 extended members that have been working together to try to do resettlement here in Webster Groves. We just chose Afghanistan because obviously there's a great need this year for resettlement for Afghans. And so we are working on finishing up our first house currently. We met our family last night and they'll be coming home this weekend probably. So we've made big progress in the last couple of months to work on just this first family. But as you know, one of the things that we've done is reached out to Eden Seminary and met with them about potentially using some of their housing to settle some future families because we'd like to keep going after this. And there were 5 vacancies at that time. And I do think potentially all 5 could work because there were 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms. So I don't know if that impacts the idea of a ratio, if we were to go to that number or if there were future vacancies. But we would like to leave it completely open to it being 1, 2, 3, 4, as many families as we can eventually raise the money for. And everyone up here has contributed financially or with encouragement or with connections. And so thank you. There have been so many hands that have contributed to putting this project together besides just the people here putting energy in every day. I do think at Eden, though, that there is potential to consider these families as students, and I wonder if that's a possibility or even necessary. But I think the definition said something like they attend an educational institution, which is exactly what the International Institute is. They will be engaged beyond English learning, which the first family for sure is going to, every member would need that. They will do resume building, job training. It will be classes the entire year. I did speak with a local police officer who's from Afghanistan. He went through the program and he said, yes, there was a lot of education and he's volunteered to be, just an encouraging person for these families, an example of how you can move in and, assimilate and find a way to make a new life. So Webster has been really pouring a lot of support into our project. So I do wonder if we could talk about the idea of them being students.
Yeah, you can talk about that at some point with Mara and figure that out as you move forward with getting them into Eden.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like it's necessary.
Yeah.
Because the ratio would always be
I think Mara said it,
acceptable.
You would have to essentially fill a building pretty much.
Yeah.
To have.
And again, the definition is supposed to be student housing of a college or university. It's very, very specific, or else then every house in Webster Groves would be considered student housing with children in that. Okay.
I think you guys will figure it out. And Liz, thank you very much for sticking to our 3 minutes so
sure.
that I can now bring up Emily Hickson, who is also going to speak about the Afghanistan project.
Well, Liz, while as Emily come up, I will invite you whatever assistance the Webster Rock Hill Ministries provide. Good. Good.
Thank
Great.
you.
I was coming to plead our case to be able to use Eden, and I think we've got that kind of settled, but this is just really exciting. We've seen so much interest across the community, and it's so great to be part of building something that's positive that we can all get behind, and just outpouring of like love and support and cash and furniture and clothes. And meeting the family yesterday, we were so excited to meet them, and we're so excited to bring them to Webster. And just, it was very stark how great the need is. This is not someone moving from Glendale. You know, they're in an extended stay hotel. It's small quarters. They need a home. They need a fresh start. They can't do that where they are right now. And I think they can really thrive in Webster. Got one house going, hopefully some, more places in Eden. And the idea is too, that we want to have more than one family here so that they can work with their community within the community. That was one of the questions that they had yesterday was, are there any other people from Afghanistan who are living in the area? And we're like, not yet, you're the first, but we're working on that. So I think this is just a great example of city government, individual citizens, businesses, Rock Hill, like churches, all coming together for a common purpose. And it's just really great to see.
Thank you. Thank you, Emily. Sarah Paradosky.
Hi, I was going to talk a little bit about the student cost. So thanks for everyone working to find some workarounds for having these families potentially stay in this space. I work for Immigrant Home English Learning Program. That's a nonprofit that provides in-home education for students who can't go, immigrant and refugee adults who maybe can't go to the group classes at the International Institute. A lot of times their family is really involved in those still, has had a lot of services or has done education there. So I've been there 13 years this month. So I've just seen how diverse our city is. I moved from South City to Webster about a year ago. So I went from a place where we had a lot of immigrants and refugees. And so I would love for our Webster Grove to be more diverse in that way and welcoming. And I think this is a very good first step. And it is something I see as building a stronger community. I think a lot of those individuals have a lot to offer, and they will need a lot of help because, they're taking these first educational steps because they're not going to be able to do the ESL at the college level quite yet. So that might take a while as far as certain members of the household, but especially some of those who haven't had prior education or home with children who are putting roots down here. There's a lot of holistic ways we can help, but I think that this is a great thing that we're doing, and thank you for your help to make this reality.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for your work on this too. My next speaker card is Sarah Riss.
Good evening. Can you hear me? Okay, cool. Regarding the DEI report, just thank you for doing that process. Thank you for keeping that on the agenda. We really support the development of the recommendations within that agenda, and on behalf of the Alliance, encourage you to move forward with the training. We are hosting a session on March 10th, during which the report will be shared by the firm conducting that. And after receiving the report, there'll be time for discussion and also gathering of thoughts and ideas. We'll certainly share with you those notes, and you're certainly welcome to attend. 7 o'clock at Webster University. And just in addition, I personally and the Alliance also supports the proposed changes on the agenda for the PCEB ordinance and encourage you to move forward with those. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Dave Buck.
Hello. Dave Buck, 124 South Elm. My remarks tonight are informed by several of you, and they are all about character. Personal character is our moral compass and represents the core values that define who we are as people and that guide our daily choices, decisions, and actions. Dr. Martin Luther King spoke often that your true success is not measured in riches or fame, but should be judged first and foremost by the content of your character. In fact, leading university professors and doctors of psychology now confirm, based on breakthrough research, that character is the #1 most important determinant of success in life, even greater than intelligence. Which begs the question, should Webster Groves' true success be judged first and foremost by the content of our community's character? For even if our city delivers exceptional city management and services, just how truly successful is Webster Groves if the community's character turns at times to the dark side and gives into, and we've seen it, dishonesty and misinformation, meanness, no attempt at understanding, negativity, selfishness, and maybe worst of all, arrogance. It's not a pretty picture, and we've all seen it. Core values is an essential element of any strategic plan. And to me, Webster needs only 6 of them to succeed. And they are honesty, kindness, empathy, positivity, generosity, and humility. For if we all did our best to embrace these 6 values and live up to them, what a wonderful world Webster Groves would be. To me, serving successfully as mayor and city council is all about character. It is the required foundation of effective leadership, and we need a council who will lead by example. I respect and appreciate all of the various candidates running for office and their intelligent campaign issues, platforms, and priorities. I've read them all. But on April 5th, I'm voting for character. Always have, just being honest. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. All right, do we have any hands up?
One moment.
Do not show any hands up online.
Okay. With no hands up, then we can move on, and we will move on to bill number 9180, which will ask Councilwoman Richardson to call for the first and second reading.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the first and second reading of bill number 9180.
Bill 9180, first reading. An ordinance of the city of Webster Groves, Missouri, amending the code of Webster Groves, Missouri by repealing Chapter 4, Article 20, Police Community Engagement Board, and enacting in lieu thereof a new Article 20, Police Community Engagement Board, and repealing Ordinance 9039, 9132, and 9160.
Right, are there any questions or issues or comments?
I'm happy we've come to an agreement on this. I know it's been a subject for a long time, so.
I have one question in here because I've been through this as the PCEB liaison. There is on the membership section, we are going to require training from board members. And so board members shall have completed or complete training. And I just want you to make sure that that sits okay with you, that the training is a requirement to be a member of this board. We don't do that with any other board or commission or council or anything in the city. But in this case, board members will have training focused on the role that systems and institutions play in maintaining racial inequity. Now, is that an hour of training? Is that 3 days? What is that? And I'm pointing that out, not because I'm opposed to it, but because I think it's different. And y'all are going to have to agree with that.
Well, Mayor, in the light of us going through DEI as a council and as a community, maybe it's just the opposite. Maybe the other commissions need to go through DEI training. Make sure that all of the commissions are on board and everybody's going in the same direction. So I have no problem with that.
With requiring the training. That's, I'm just throwing that out there for your discussion as to, city attorney, is it okay to require that training?
And it is because it's the level of commitment. So again, if an individual doesn't want to serve because of that, they would simply say, I'm not going to serve. But the training could be accomplished in a lot of ways. You could do it at the meetings. You could bring someone in and that would become your training. So as you have a meeting, you would simply incorporate that into your scheduled meetings. And I think you could accomplish that fairly easily without, again, recognizing that we are asking people to make a substantial commitment anyway. I think you could do that within the confines of your meeting. So I don't think it necessarily needs to be outside in a way. You can bring people in. There's things that you can do that would accomplish that in the course of a meeting, which would minimize the already great contribution that these folk are making.
That's a good point. So we're not requiring them to have that training before they become a member, but I'm just bringing it up.
Wasn't there just a question earlier, and maybe I'm confusing issues, but we were talking about a different issue and required training, and there was a question of, I think when we were talking about the DEI commission,
Training. Mm-hmm.
and there was a question around requiring people to take training. Am I misremembering that?
No, I'm the one who mentioned that because I think the requirements for the council are defined in the charter. And so that's why it would be the question. We get to define, I think, Neil, you're the lawyer, the requirements for board and commission member.
Right.
I always like it and say, you're the lawyer.
Yeah. Yes, I am.
Over here.
Right. Yeah, again, there's ways to accomplish it that would, again, minimize the inconvenience of it. But the importance of it is, again, to make sure that people have a vision on the bigger picture. And I think that's a good thing.
All right. If no one has a question or a change, then we can call for that second reading.
Bill 9180, second reading. An ordinance of the city of Webster Groves, Missouri, amending the code of Webster Groves, Missouri by repealing Chapter 4, Article 20, Police Community Engagement Board, and enacting in lieu thereof a new Article 20, Police Community Engagement Board, and repealing Ordinance 9039, 9132, and 9160.
Right. Does anyone care to remove anything from the consent agenda? If not, Councilmember Smith, could you call for the approval of the consent agenda?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
Councilmember Arnold,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander.
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson.
Yes.
Mayor Welch.
Yes. All right, we will be going into closed session for personnel. If you would do that, please, Councilwoman Arnold.
Yes, sir. I'd like to call for an executive closed session under number 3, Personnel, Missouri Statute 610.021, open paren 3, close paren.
Second.
Could you add number 1 to that as well?
And number 1, attorney-client privilege communications, Missouri Statute 610.021, open paren 1, close paren.
Second. Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander.
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson.
Yes.
Mayor Welch.
Yes.
Councilmember Arnold.
Yes.
All right. So thank you all for coming this evening. We appreciate your attendance here. Have a good rest of the evening. You can get home in order to watch the State of the Union address.